The wind howled across the frozen wasteland of Asterion, its icy fingers clawing at anything that dared to exist in its domain. The planet's surface, a brutal landscape of endless white, disappeared into the darkness as the sun set behind thick storm clouds. Tonight was a peak storm night, the temperature plummeting to record lows even for this merciless world. Jonas Carter huddled in his thermal shelter, the reinforced fabric walls shuddering against the gale. His mission to investigate the disappearance of previous survey teams on Asterion had been delayed by the unexpected intensity of the storm. The emergency beacon on his wrist blinked steadily, its faint green glow the only warmth in his temporary refuge. Base Command, this is Carter. Storm intensity has increased to level 9. Continuing mission reconnaissance is impossible until conditions improve. Requesting permission to extend shelter period. Static answered his transmission. The storm was interfering with communications. Not unusual, but inconvenient. Jonas sighed, his breath forming a small cloud in front of his face despite the shelter's heating system working at maximum capacity. He checked his supplies. 3 days of emergency rations, water purifier, and enough fuel cells to keep the shelter operational for 5 days. He should be fine if the storm passed within its projected time frame. Jonas allowed himself a moment of quiet contemplation. This wasn't his first solo mission, but Asterion felt different, more hostile, more alive somehow. His thoughts drifted to Emma, his sister, who had perished 7 years ago during a similar exploration mission on Europa. The memory of her final transmission still haunted him. It's so cold, Jonas. I can't feel anything anymore. Tell Mom I'm sorry. He had failed her then, unable to reach her location in time. The rescue team found her frozen, still clutching her emergency beacon that had malfunctioned in the extreme cold. A faint beeping interrupted his brooding. Jonas glanced at his equipment panel. Something was registering on his scanner, a weak distress signal, barely detectable through the storm interference. That's impossible, he muttered, adjusting the scanner sensitivity. No one should be out in this storm, and Base Command would have informed him of any other operatives in his sector. The signal pulsed again, weaker this time. Jonas hesitated, his mind racing through protocols and possibilities. It could be a malfunction, an echo of his own beacon, or perhaps debris from a previous mission reactivated by the storm's electromagnetic disturbances. But it could also be someone in trouble. Emma's face flashed before his eyes. Her frozen features, forever locked in terror and pain. Not again, he whispered, decision made. Not on my watch. Jonas activated his thermal suit, checking the integrity of each seal meticulously. The shelter's heating system would maintain minimal function in his absence, providing a warm return point if he could make it back. The scanner indicated the signal was coming from approximately 2 kilometers northeast, a treacherous journey in these conditions, but not impossible. Base Command, this is Carter, he transmitted, not expecting a response. I'm picking up a distress signal. Moving to investigate. We'll report findings upon return to shelter. The moment Jonas stepped outside, the wind knocked him sideways, ice particles stinging his exposed face shield like tiny needles. He activated his suit's magnetic boots, providing some stability against the gale, and began trudging through the knee-deep snow, guided only by the intermittent blip on his scanner. The journey seemed endless, each step requiring immense effort. Twice he nearly turned back, but each time the memory of Emma pushed him forward. The signal grew stronger, then suddenly changed in character, becoming erratic, pulsing with a pattern Jonas had never encountered before. After an hour of grueling progress, his scanner indicated he was almost upon the source. As he crested a small ridge, Jonas saw it. The unmistakable shape of an escape pod half buried in the snow, its design unlike any human craft he'd encountered. Strange symbols decorated its hull, glowing faintly with an internal light that was rapidly fading. "Hello," Jonas called out, his voice immediately swallowed by the howling wind. He approached cautiously, weapon at ready. First contact protocols dictated extreme caution, but something told Jonas that whoever, or whatever, was inside this pod needed immediate help. The pod's hatch was partially open, ice forming around its edges. Jonas pried it wider, his suit's enhanced strength making the task possible. Inside, huddled in a small compartment designed for a being slightly smaller than an adult human, was a child. At least, Jonas thought it was a child. Its skin was pale blue, almost translucent in places, with delicate patterns that seemed to pulse with the creature's labored breathing. The child's eyes were closed, its small form trembling violently. Around one wrist was a strange device, intermittently emitting the signal Jonas had detected. Protocol dictated immediate reporting of alien contact. Protocol dictated containment, quarantine, and careful approach. Protocol could go to hell. The alien child was freezing to death before his eyes, and Jonas knew with absolute certainty that he couldn't watch another being die in this frozen wasteland. "Hey there," he whispered, knowing the child couldn't understand, but hoping his tone might register. "I'm going to help you. You're not dying today." Jonas removed his outer thermal layer, wrapping it around the small blue figure. The child didn't respond, its breathing shallow and irregular. Carefully, Jonas lifted the alien from the pod, cradling it against his chest. The physical contact sent a strange, tingling sensation up his arms, but he ignored it, focusing instead on the return journey. The child weighed surprisingly little, its body temperature dangerously low even for a species he presumed was adapted to cold environments. "Stay with me, little one," Jonas murmured, setting his course back toward his shelter. "We've got a long walk ahead." The storm seemed to intensify as Jonas made his way back, as if Asterion itself objected to his rescue mission. Each step became a battle against the elements, the additional weight of the child and the reduced insulation of his suit, making the journey doubly treacherous. His internal temperature monitor beeped warnings, but Jonas pushed forward relentlessly. As he walked, he couldn't help but notice a strange energy signature emanating from the child. His scanner detected unusual readings, patterns of energy that defied conventional analysis. Whatever this child was, wherever it had come from, it was unlike anything in human records. "You're quite the mystery," Jonas said to the unconscious figure. "But mysteries can wait. Surviving comes first." Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Jonas spotted the faint outline of his shelter through the swirling snow. His extremities had gone numb, warning signs of early frostbite, but he'd made it. The alien child still breathed, though each intake of air seemed more labored than the last. Once inside, Jonas activated the shelter's emergency medical protocols, boosting the heating system to maximum and preparing the limited medical equipment he carried. He had no idea if human medical procedures would help an alien physiology, but hypothermia seemed a universal condition. As warmth slowly returned to the shelter, Jonas studied the strange child more carefully. Its features were humanoid, but definitely alien. Slightly elongated skull, no visible ears, and those strange patterns beneath the skin that seemed to glow faintly from within. The device on its wrist occasionally emitted soft pulses of light, and Jonas wondered if it was some sort of health monitor or communication device. "Who are you?" he whispered. "And what were you doing out there all alone?" The alien child gave no response, but its breathing seemed to stabilize as the shelter's temperature rose. Jonas wrapped it in thermal blankets, careful not to disturb the wrist device, and prepared a warm nutrient solution. He had no idea if the child could consume human sustenance, but having it ready seemed prudent. As the storm raged outside, Jonas kept vigil over his mysterious guest, defying protocol, defying common sense perhaps, but following something deeper, a conviction that compassion transcended species, that no child, human or alien, should die alone in the cold. Hours passed, the storm showing no signs of abating. Jonas dozed fitfully, waking frequently to check on the alien child. During one such check, he found himself staring into large, luminous eyes, the color of aurora, shifting between blues and greens with occasional flashes of purple. The child was awake, watching him with an expression impossible to read, but unmistakably alert. It made no sound, No movement. Just observed Jonas with those mesmerizing eyes. "Hello," Jonas said softly, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. "You're safe now." The alien child blinked, then glanced around the shelter, taking in the unfamiliar surroundings. Its gaze returned to Jonas, and it tilted its head slightly, a gesture so human-like that Jonas couldn't help but smile. "My name is Jonas," he said, pointing to himself. "Jonas." The child studied him for a long moment, then raised one slender hand to point at Jonas's chest. Its mouth moved, forming sounds unlike any human language, soft, melodic tones that seemed to resonate in the air. Jonas nodded encouragingly. "That's right, Jonas." He pointed to the child, raising his eyebrows in question. The alien hesitated, then placed its hand over its own chest. A single word emerged, barely audible but distinct. "Cora." "Cora," Jonas repeated. "Nice to meet you, Cora." The alien child, Cora, watched him warily, still wrapped in thermal blankets. The device on her wrist, Jonas had decided to think of Cora as female, though he had no idea if such distinctions applied to her species. Pulsed more steadily now, its light a soft blue rather than the erratic patterns from before. Jonas reached for the container of warm nutrient solution he'd prepared. "Are you hungry? Thirsty?" He mimed drinking, bringing an imaginary cup to his lips. Cora observed the gesture, then nodded, another surprisingly human action. Jonas offered the container, watching carefully as she sniffed the contents before taking a hesitant sip. Her expression changed, eyes widening slightly, but she didn't reject the offering, instead taking another, larger drink. "Good, that's good," Jonas said, relieved. At least they'd overcome one potential barrier. As Cora drank, Jonas noticed the wrist device projecting a small holographic display, symbols scrolling too quickly for him to focus on. Cora noticed his attention and quickly covered the device with her other hand, fear suddenly evident in her posture. "It's okay," Jonas said soothingly, raising his hands in a universal gesture of peace. "I won't touch it. I promise." Cora's fear didn't fully subside, but she lowered her hand, watching Jonas carefully. The device's display disappeared, but its light continued to pulse steadily. Using simple gestures and drawn diagrams on his tablet, Jonas attempted to communicate with Cora. Progress was slow, but he determined that she had escaped from something or someone. Her escape pod had malfunctioned, sending her off course before crash landing on Asterion. Beyond that, details were scarce, but the fear in her eyes whenever Jonas tried to inquire about her origins was unmistakable. The shelter's sensor console suddenly emitted a sharp beep, startling them both. Jonas moved to check it, heart sinking as he read the display. Multiple energy signatures were approaching, artificial, powerful, and definitely not from any authorized human expedition. "We've got company," Jonas muttered, turning back to Cora. The alien child had heard the alarm too, and her reaction confirmed Jonas's suspicions. Her skin had paled further, the luminous patterns beneath fading to almost nothing. Pure terror reflected in those aurora eyes. "They're looking for you, aren't they?" Jonas didn't need a translator to understand her response. Cora's entire body trembled, and she clutched the wrist device protectively. Jonas made a quick decision. "We can't stay here. They'll find us too easily." He began gathering essential supplies: emergency rations, water, portable heater cells, and a sidearm. "There's an old weather station about 7 kilometers south. We might find better communications equipment there. Maybe send a distress signal to my base." Cora watched him prepare, then slipped from her blanket cocoon to stand on shaky legs. She was small, reaching only to Jonas's waist, but there was a determined set to her stance that transcended their communication barrier. She pointed to her wrist device, then to the sensor console, making a connection gesture with her hands. "Your tracker," Jonas realized. "They're following your device?" Cora nodded, then made a series of quick adjustments to the wrist device. The holographic display reappeared, symbols rearranging themselves until the device's light dimmed significantly. She looked up at Jonas, determination replacing fear in her eyes. Temporary fix? Jonas guessed. Cora's slight nod confirmed his interpretation. It'll have to do. We need to move now. The storm had decreased in intensity, though the wind still howled mournfully across the frozen landscape. Jonas secured Cora in additional thermal layers, creating a makeshift suit that would protect her from the worst of the cold. The alien child watched his preparations with keen interest, occasionally making adjustments that suggested an innate understanding of survival in harsh conditions. Before leaving the relative safety of the shelter, Jonas checked the sensor readings one last time. The approaching energy signatures had changed course slightly, still heading in their general direction, but with less precision than before. Cora's tampering with her device had worked, at least temporarily. Let's hope we can stay ahead of them, Jonas said, more to himself than to Cora. Ready. The alien child took a deep breath, then nodded firmly. Together, they stepped out into the frozen wasteland, two unlikely companions united by circumstance and the universal will to survive. Their progress was slow but steady, Jonas constantly adjusting their course to take advantage of the terrain's natural cover. Cora proved surprisingly resilient, keeping pace despite her recent ordeal. Occasionally, she would stop, placing one hand on the ground as if listening to the planet itself, before pointing in a slightly altered direction. You sense something? Jonas asked during one such pause. Cora nodded, gesturing downward with a sweeping motion, then mimicking something rising from beneath the ice. Her expression conveyed urgency, not fear, a warning rather than terror. Something under the ice? Jonas checked his scanner, but it showed nothing unusual. I'll trust you on this one. As they continued their journey, the sky darkened further, not with approaching night, but with another wave of the storm. The wind picked up, driving ice particles before it like miniature projectiles. Jonas pulled Cora closer, shielding her smaller form with his body. Weather station should be just over that ridge, he shouted above the wind, pointing to a dark outline barely visible through the swirling snow. Almost there. Cora suddenly stopped, her body going rigid. The device on her wrist flared brightly, symbols racing across its holographic display. She turned to Jonas, terror once again filling her eyes, and pointed behind them with a trembling hand. Jonas didn't need a scanner to confirm what his instincts were already screaming. Their pursuers had found them. Through the storm came dark shapes, moving with purpose and precision that defied the harsh conditions. Humanoid figures in sleek armor, weapons at ready, advancing methodically toward their position. Run, Jonas urged, pushing Cora toward the weather station. Go! The alien child hesitated, looking back at Jonas with an expression that needed no translation. Concern, fear for him, rather than herself. I'll be right behind you, Jonas promised. Go! Cora finally complied, her small form darting toward the weather station with surprising speed. Jonas drew his sidearm, knowing it would provide little more than a delaying action against whatever technology their pursuers possessed, but determined to give Cora every possible second of head start. The first energy blast struck the ground near his feet, turning snow instantly to steam. Jonas returned fire, aiming for the lead figure's sensor array rather than vital areas. His shot connected, causing the pursuer to stagger momentarily, but the others continued their advance unperturbed. Jonas didn't wait for a second volley. He turned and ran, zigzagging to present a more difficult target. Energy blasts sizzled past him, superheating the air with their passage. One grazed his left arm, instantly numbing it from shoulder to fingertips. The weather station loomed before him, its abandoned structure a testament to earlier, failed attempts to establish permanent presence on Asterion. Jonas could see Cora at the entrance, frantically working the ancient manual override to open the sealed door. With a final burst of speed, Jonas reached her just as the door groaned open. They tumbled inside, and Jonas immediately slammed his good hand against the emergency lockdown control. Ancient mechanisms ground to life, sealing the entrance with reinforced barriers designed to withstand Asterion's most violent storms. That won't hold them for long, Jonas panted, clutching his numbed arm. But it buys us some time. The weather station's interior was dark and cold, emergency power providing only minimal lighting. Abandoned equipment covered in frost lined the walls, most of it outdated by decades. Jonas moved quickly to the central console, brushing away ice crystals to access the controls. Let's see if any of this still works, he muttered, activating the station's primary systems. To his surprise, ancient machinery hummed to life, power reserves still operational after years of neglect. Cora explored the station, her attention drawn to a wall of monitors that once displayed atmospheric readings from across the Styrian surface. She touched one screen, and to Jonas's amazement, it flickered to life, showing thermal imagery of the area surrounding the station. "How did you?" Jonas began, but Cora was already moving to another console, her fingers dancing across controls with unexpected familiarity. The station's communication array activated, its dish outside, turning slowly to align with distant satellites. Jonas watched in astonishment as Cora manipulated the equipment with growing confidence, somehow interfacing her wrist device with the human technology. "You're full of surprises, aren't you?" Jonas said admiringly. A sudden impact shook the station, dust and ice falling from the ceiling. Their pursuers had begun their assault on the entrance barrier. "They're persistent, I'll give them that," Jonas grimaced, checking the thermal imagery Cora had activated. At least 6 figures surrounded the station, their heat signatures indicating advanced exothermic suits, military-grade technology. Cora turned to Jonas, her expression urgent. She pointed to her wrist device, then to the communication array, making a transmission gesture. "You're trying to send a message?" Jonas asked. "To whom?" Cora's response was to activate a holographic display from her device, projecting it onto the station's main screen. A star map appeared, focusing on a system Jonas didn't recognize. One planet was highlighted, pulsing softly. "You're home," Jonas guessed. Cora shook her head, pointing instead to herself, then making a small cage with her fingers, followed by breaking the cage apart. "Not home," Jonas realized. "A prison? You escaped from there?" The alien child nodded vigorously, then pointed to the communication array again. Her intention was clear now. She needed to send a warning, perhaps to others like herself. Another impact rocked the station, more violent than before. The entrance barrier wouldn't hold much longer. "Do what you need to do," Jonas said, moving to a weapons locker he'd spotted earlier. "I'll buy you whatever time I can." The locker contained a single pulse rifle, old but serviceable, with half a power cell remaining. Not much, but better than his sidearm against armored opponents. Jonas positioned himself near the entrance, using abandoned equipment as makeshift cover. Cora worked frantically at the communication array, her wrist device interfacing with the human technology in ways Jonas couldn't comprehend. The star map on the main screen zoomed in further, focusing on specific coordinates, while a message in alien script scrolled alongside. A final, devastating impact sent the entrance barrier crashing inward. Frigid air rushed into the station, carrying swirling snow and the silhouettes of their pursuers. "Stay down," Jonas shouted to Cora, opening fire with a pulse rifle. The weapon's charge cut through the swirling snow, striking the lead figure square in the chest. The armor absorbed most of the impact, but the figure staggered backward, momentarily disoriented. The others spread out, taking cover while returning fire. Energy blasts tore into Jonas's makeshift barricade, superheating metal and plastic into molten slag. The temperature in the station rose rapidly as thermal energy dissipated from the weapon's discharge. Through the chaos, a voice called out, electronically amplified and translated into rough, accented English. "Surrender the specimen. Compliance will mean survival for you, human." "Specimen," Jonas called back, anger flaring. "There's no specimen here, just a child you're hunting down like animals." The response came in the form of intensified weapons fire. Jonas ducked lower, his cover rapidly deteriorating. He glanced back at Cora, who was making final adjustments to her transmission. Their eyes met across the station, and in that moment, Jonas saw something new in the alien child's expression. Not fear, not determination, but resolve. She had completed her task, and now turned her attention fully to their desperate situation. The wrist device flared with sudden brilliance, its holographic display expanding to encompass the entire communications array. The star map disappeared, replaced by swirling patterns of light that seemed to pulse in rhythm with Cora's rapid breathing. The station's floor began to vibrate, subtle at first, then with growing intensity. The attackers paused their assault, sensors suddenly detecting something their instruments couldn't identify. "What are you doing?" the leader demanded, his translator unable to hide the apprehension in his voice. Cora stood straight now, the wrist device blazing with energy that spilled from its confines to envelop her small form. She raised both hands, patterns beneath her skin glowing with the same intensity as the device, and a single word escaped her lips. A command, a summons, a plea. The ice beneath the station cracked with a sound like thunder. Their attackers scrambled for stability as the floor heaved beneath them. Jonas braced himself against a console, watching in awe as Cora channeled power he couldn't comprehend. From the fracturing ice came shapes, translucent, shifting forms that rose like mist from the depths of Asterion itself. They swirled around the station, passing through solid matter as if it didn't exist, converging on the invaders with silent, inexorable purpose. Whisperers, Jonas breathed, recognizing the phenomena from old survey records. Mysterious energy patterns occasionally detected beneath Asterion's surface, dismissed as sensor anomalies by previous expeditions. The lead attacker fired at the nearest Whisperer, his weapon's energy passing harmlessly through the ethereal form. The Whisperer responded by enveloping him completely, its translucent substance solidifying into crystalline ice that encased the attacker in seconds. The other invaders retreated in disarray, firing wildly at the Whisperers with similar lack of effect. One by one, they were surrounded, their weapons and armor rendered useless against entities that existed between states of matter. Cora swayed, the effort of summoning the Whisperers clearly taking a toll on her small body. Jonas rushed to her side, supporting her as the wrist device's brilliance began to fade. "What are they?" Jonas asked softly, watching as the last attacker was neutralized, not killed but contained in a prison of living ice. Cora looked up at him, exhaustion evident in her aurora eyes. She touched Jonas's temple lightly, and sudden understanding flowed into his mind. Not words, but concepts, images, emotions. The Whisperers were Asterion's original inhabitants, evolved beyond physical form, dormant until awakened by Cora's unique energy signature. They responded to emotion, to intention, peace or threat, compassion or cruelty. They sensed you weren't a threat, Jonas realized. They felt your fear, your need for protection. Cora nodded, then pointed to the now frozen attackers, making a questioning gesture. What to do with them? Jonas considered the immobilized figures. They came to take you back, to treat you like property rather than a person. The leader of the attack force, partially free of his icy prison, spat words that the translator converted to broken English. The specimen is property, genetically engineered, purpose-built. Rinder Corporation holds full rights to this asset. Jonas felt Cora stiffen beside him, the patterns beneath her skin dimming with renewed fear. He placed a protective arm around her shoulders. "She's a child," Jonas replied coldly. "Not an asset, not property, and certainly not going anywhere with you." The attacker laughed harshly. Sentiment from a human? Unexpected, but irrelevant. More will come. Rinter never abandons valuable investments. A Whisperer drifted closer to the speaking attacker, responding to the hostility in his voice. The ice prison thickened, cutting off further threats. Jonas turned to Cora, a plan forming in his mind. "The communication array, your message." "Did it send?" Cora nodded, pointing to her wrist device, which now displayed what appeared to be a confirmation sequence. "Good," Jonas said. "Then maybe we have allies out there, somewhere." He glanced at the frozen attackers. But your friend is right about one thing. They'll send more. We can't stay here. The station's sensors suddenly blared warnings. The storm was intensifying again, reaching levels that would make travel impossible for hours, perhaps days. Additionally, the Whisperer's emergence had triggered seismic instability beneath the station. The ice was fracturing in expanding patterns, threatening the structure's integrity. Out of the frying pan, Jonas muttered. He looked at Cora, who was studying the seismic readings with obvious concern. Any suggestions? The alien child considered for a moment, then pointed to a section of the station's old maps, indicating a location approximately 5 kilometers east, labeled simply as Anomaly 17. Jonas zoomed in on the coordinates. What's there? Cora couldn't explain in words, but her gestures suggested shelter, safety from both storm and pursuers. She pointed to the Whisperers, then to the location, indicating a connection. Their territory? Jonas guessed. A place they protect? Cora nodded, though her expression suggested it wasn't quite that simple. Regardless, they had few options. The station was becoming increasingly unstable as tremors continued beneath it, and the attackers' reinforcements could arrive once the storm abated. Anomaly 17 it is, Jonas decided. Let's gather whatever supplies we can carry. They worked quickly, salvaging medical supplies, emergency rations, and portable power cells from the station stores. Jonas found a smaller thermal suit in a locker, designed for a human child, but adaptable to Cora's alien physiology. The added protection would be crucial for the journey ahead. As they prepared to leave, Cora approached the frozen attackers, studying them with an unreadable expression. She raised her hand, the wrist device glowing softly, and the Whisperers responded, not by releasing the invaders, but by altering their icy prisons into more sustainable forms that would last hours rather than minutes. Buying us time? Jonas asked. Cora nodded, her expression solemn. They deserved worse, Jonas muttered, remembering the leader's callous description of Cora as property, as a specimen. The alien child touched his arm lightly, shaking her head. Her eyes conveyed what words could not. Revenge wasn't her way, wasn't what she wanted from her protectors. The Whisperers had responded to her fear, her need for safety, but she wouldn't use them as instruments of cruelty. You're a better person than I am, Jonas admitted quietly. Let's go before the whole place comes down around us. They exited through a maintenance hatch, emerged into the howling storm. The Whisperers accompanied them, forming a protective barrier against the worst of the wind and cold. With these ethereal guides, Jonas and Cora set out for Anomaly 17, leaving the weather station and its frozen occupants behind. The journey was arduous despite the Whisperers' protection. The storm had transformed the landscape, erasing familiar landmarks and creating treacherous terrain. Several times they were forced to detour around massive fissures that had opened in the ice, evidence of the seismic activity spreading across this region of Asterion. Cora seemed to grow weaker as they traveled, the effort of maintaining connection with the Whisperers taking its toll. The patterns beneath her skin flickered erratically, and twice she stumbled, saved from falling only by Jonas's quick reactions. We need to rest, Jonas insisted after the second incident, setting up a temporary shelter in the lee of an ice formation. The Whisperers gathered closer, their translucent forms providing additional insulation against the cold. Inside the makeshift shelter, Jonas checked Cora's condition. The alien child's temperature had dropped again, her breathing shallow and rapid. The wrist device pulsed warnings in its alien script, projecting diagnostic information Jonas couldn't interpret but recognized as critical. What's happening to you? He asked, frustrated by their communication barrier. How can I help? Cora weakly raised her hand, touching Jonas's temple as she had done in the weather station. This time, the mental connection was fragmented, distorted by her deteriorating condition, but Jonas received enough to understand the basics of her crisis. The Whisperers were drawn to Cora's unique energy signature, the same reason Renter Corporation valued her so highly. But maintaining connection with them required energy she couldn't sustain indefinitely. She had been designed, engineered specifically to interface with entities like the Whisperers, but her creators had built in limitations to ensure control. Those limitations were now threatening her life. They made you dependent, Jonas realized with growing anger. Created you to access these beings, then ensured you couldn't survive without their assistance. He examined the wrist device more closely. This isn't just a communicator or tracker. It's regulating your metabolism, isn't it? Controlling how much energy you can channel. Cora's slight nod confirmed his theory. The device was both her lifeline and her leash, a cruel insurance policy by her creators. Jonas's mind raced through potential solutions. He couldn't remove the device. Doing so would likely kill her immediately. He couldn't modify it without understanding its incredibly advanced technology. What they needed was a power source, something to supplement the energy Cora was rapidly depleting. Anomaly 17, Jonas said suddenly. That's why you wanted to go there, isn't it? There's something there that can help you. Cora's eyes brightened momentarily with hope, and she managed a weak nod before lapsing into a state of semi-consciousness. Her connection with the Whisperers wavered, the ethereal entities becoming agitated, their forms fluctuating between solid and gaseous states. Jonas checked their position. According to his scanner, they had covered just over half the distance to Anomaly 17. In normal conditions, the remaining journey would take perhaps an hour. In this storm, with Cora's deteriorating condition, it could take 3 times as long, time she might not have. No choice, Jonas muttered, packing up their temporary shelter. We keep moving. He lifted Cora's small form, cradling her against his chest as he had when first rescuing her from the escape pod. The Whisperers swirled around them, their protection now sporadic as Cora's control faltered, but still providing some shield against the worst of the elements. Each step forward became a battle of will, Jonas's determination pitted against Asterian's merciless environment. His scanner continued to track their progress toward Anomaly 17, the distance decreasing with agonizing slowness. Cora's breathing grew increasingly labored, the patterns beneath her skin dimming to barely visible traces. Stay with me, Jonas urged, his voice rough with emotion and exertion. We're almost there. Just hold on a little longer. Whether Cora heard him through her semi-conscious state, Jonas couldn't tell, but he continued talking, hoping his voice might provide an anchor for her fading awareness. I lost my sister on a world like this, he told her as they trudged through deepening snow. I couldn't reach her in time. I promised myself never again, never to leave anyone to die alone in the cold. He adjusted his grip, ensuring Cora remained as warm as possible against his body heat. That includes stubborn alien kids with a knack for trouble. The scanner beeped, indicating they had entered the outer perimeter of Anomaly 17. Jonas looked up, expecting to see some structure or geographical feature, but there was nothing visible through the swirling snow except more ice and rock. Where to now? He wondered aloud, scanning in all directions. The Whisperers seemed more agitated than ever, their forms elongating, stretching toward a particular ice formation that looked no different from countless others they had passed. Following their guidance, Jonas approached the formation. As he drew closer, he noticed subtle differences. The ice here was more crystalline, refracting light in unusual patterns despite the dim conditions. The formation itself wasn't random, but possessed a geometric precision that nature rarely achieved without assistance. The Whisperers converged on a specific section of the ice wall, their forms pressing against it with increasing urgency. Jonas adjusted Cora in his arms and reached out to touch the spot they indicated. The ice was warm beneath his gloved hand, impossible yet undeniable. As he maintained contact, the warmth increased, and tiny points of light appeared within the crystalline structure, spreading outward from his touch like a network of stars. Before Jonas could react, the entire ice formation transformed. What appeared solid became permeable, creating an opening that led into a space beyond, a cave or tunnel illuminated by the same points of light now embedded throughout the ice walls. The Whisperers flowed into the opening without hesitation. Jonas followed, carrying Cora through the strange portal and into Anomaly 17. The environment inside defied everything Jonas knew about Asterion. Where the planet's surface was a frozen wasteland, this cavern was temperate, almost warm. The walls pulsed with bioluminescent light, thousands of tiny ice crystals glowing from within like frozen fireflies. The air itself felt different, rich with oxygen and trace elements Jonas's scanner couldn't identify. "Ice Firefly Cave," Jonas whispered, understanding Cora's destination at last. The whispers moved more freely here, their forms more defined, more purposeful. They led Jonas deeper into the cavern, past formations of crystal that hummed with subtle resonance, creating a symphony of tones just at the edge of hearing. At the center of the cavern stood a structure unlike anything Jonas had encountered in his years of space exploration. A crystalline formation resembling a tree, its branches extending toward the cavern ceiling, its roots disappearing into the floor. The entire structure pulsed with energy, the same patterns that flowed beneath Cora's skin replicated on a massive scale. The whispers circled the crystal tree, their movements becoming more agitated as Cora's condition continued to deteriorate. Jonas approached cautiously, Cora's small form now frighteningly still in his arms. "What do I do?" he asked the whisperers, knowing they couldn't respond in words, but hoping they might guide him somehow. In answer, a section of the crystal tree shifted, creating a small recess perfectly sized for Cora's diminutive form. Jonas hesitated, instinctively protective, but the urgency of Cora's condition overcame his caution. Gently, he placed the alien child in the recess. Immediately, the crystal structure responded, tendrils of light extending to envelop Cora. Her wrist device activated automatically, interfacing with the larger structure in a cascade of holographic symbols. Jonas stepped back, watching anxiously as energy flowed from the crystal tree into Cora's small body. The patterns beneath her skin brightened gradually, regaining their luminescence. Her breathing deepened, stabilized, and color returned to her pale blue complexion. "It's working," Jonas breathed, relief washing over him. The whispers seemed to share his sentiment, their forms settling into more peaceful configurations as they drifted around the chamber. Jonas took the opportunity to examine their surroundings more thoroughly, his explorer's instincts awakening now that Cora's immediate crisis had passed. The cavern showed signs of intelligent design, not random natural formations, but deliberate architecture disguised as natural features. The bioluminescent crystals were arranged in patterns that, when viewed from certain angles, resembled writing or mathematical equations. The crystal tree itself stood on a platform inscribed with concentric circles, each containing symbols similar to those displayed by Cora's wrist device. This was built, Jonas realized, a refuge? A power source? Maybe both. As he contemplated the ancient structure, Cora stirred in her crystal cradle. Her eyes opened, clearer, brighter than before, and fixed on Jonas with recognition and something more, understanding. She raised her hand, the wrist device now glowing steadily, and gestured for Jonas to approach. When he did, she reached out to touch his temple as before, but this time the connection that flowed between them was sharper, more coherent. Images filled Jonas's mind. Cora's origins in a sterile laboratory, created by the Renter Corporation as part of Project Whisper, an attempt to communicate with and ultimately control the mysterious entities discovered on Asterion and similar planets. Cora was one of many prototypes, genetically engineered with increasing levels of empathic ability, designed to serve as conduits between the corporation and the valuable resources these entities could access. But Cora had developed beyond her programming, developing self-awareness, emotions, a moral compass that rejected her intended purpose as a tool of exploitation. Her escape had been assisted by a sympathetic scientist who couldn't bear to watch another sentient being treated as property. The transmission she had sent from the weather station was a warning to others like herself still held in Renter facilities across the galaxy. The crystal tree was revealed as a remnant of Asterion's original civilization, the biological ancestors of the Whisperers before they transcended physical form. It served as both an archive of their knowledge and a nexus of the energy the Whisperers now embodied. Korra's genetic design allowed her to interface with it, drawing strength while also accessing the accumulated wisdom of a species millions of years old. The mental connection faded, leaving Jonas momentarily disoriented, but filled with newfound understanding. Korra sat up in her crystal cradle, strength visibly returning to her small frame. She smiled, the first truly joyful expression Jonas had seen from her, and pointed her chest. "Korra," she said, her voice stronger than before. Then she pointed to the crystal tree, then to the Whisperers circling above, then back to herself. "Korra, you're connected to them," Jonas said, grasping her meaning. "Your name? It means something to them. Something important." Korra nodded eagerly, then made a series of gestures that, with their enhanced communication, Jonas now partially understood. Her name in the ancient language of Asterian's original inhabitants translated roughly to bridge or mediator, a cruel irony given her intended purpose as a corporate tool, now transformed into something profound as she forged a genuine connection with the beings she had been created to exploit. Their moment of understanding was shattered by a tremor that shook the entire cavern. Crystal shards fell from the ceiling, narrowly missing them. The Whisperers reacted immediately, their forms condensing into protective barriers around Korra and Jonas. "What's happening?" Jonas moved to check his scanner, which displayed alarming readings. The seismic activity they had noticed earlier had intensified dramatically, centered on their previous location, the weather station. Korra slipped from her crystal cradle, standing on steady legs. She touched the crystal tree one last time, communing with it briefly before turning to Jonas with an expression of urgency. She pointed to the scanner, then made an explosive gesture with her hands. "The station? It's going to explode?" Jonas checked the readings again, noting the rapidly increasing energy signatures. "No, not the station itself, the attacker's ship. They're planning to blast their way out of the ice." Korra nodded grimly, then indicated the cavern around them, making a crumbling motion. The blast could destabilize this entire region, Jonas realized. Trigger a chain reaction through the fissures we saw. He looked at Korra intently. "How much time do we have?" The alien child consulted her wrist device, which now functioned more efficiently after its connection with the crystal tree. She held up her hand, fingers spread. "5? 5 what? Minutes? Hours?" Korra pointed to the scanner's chronometer, then at its minute display. 5 minutes. Not great odds. Jonas surveyed the cavern, mind racing through options. "We can't outrun the blast radius, not on foot." The Whisperers swirled more rapidly, responding to their rising concern. Korra watched them for a moment, then turned to Jonas with sudden determination. She pointed to herself, then to the crystal tree, then made a sweeping gesture encompassing the entire cavern. "You can use the tree? Harness its energy somehow." Jonas guessed. Korra nodded, but her expression remained grave. She touched her wrist device, then made a braking motion, followed by touching her heart sadly. The implication was clear enough. Using the crystal tree's full power might require sacrificing her connection to it, perhaps even damaging the very device that regulated her vital functions. "No," Jonas said firmly. "There has to be another way. The risk is too great." Korra shook her head, her resolve evident. She gestured to the scanner again, for minutes remaining, then to the cavern walls, the ice fireflies, the Whispers themselves. Her meaning was clear. This place, these beings, deserve protection, even at personal cost. Another tremor shook the cavern, more violent than before. The crystal tree vibrated with resonant energy, responding to the building pressure outside. The Whisperers became increasingly agitated, their forms flickering between states as the delicate balance of their environment faced imminent disruption. Jonas recognized the look in Korra's eyes. He had seen it before, in soldiers prepared to sacrifice themselves for their comrades, in rescuers willing to risk everything for strangers. It was determination courage, the decision that some things mattered more than individual survival. It was a look that honored Emma's memory more than endless guilt ever could. "What do you need me to do?" Jonas asked quietly. Cora's expression softened with gratitude. She quickly outlined her plan through gestures and their partial mental connection. She would use the crystal tree to amplify her connection with the Whisperers, directing their energy to create a containment field around the explosion. The blast would still occur, but its force would be channeled upward, away from the fragile network of caverns and fissures beneath the ice. The risk came from the feedback. Channeling that much energy through her wrist device could overload its regulatory functions, potentially causing permanent damage to both the device and Cora herself. And there's no other option? No way to stop the explosion entirely? Jonas pressed, still searching for alternatives. Cora shook her head regretfully. The attacker's ship had initiated an automatic emergency protocol, designed to free it from entrapment regardless of consequences. The process was irreversible once started. 2 minutes remained. "Let's do it," Jonas said, his decision made. "But I'm staying with you. Whatever happens, we face it together." The alien child started to protest, pointing to the cavern entrance, making a clear, runaway gesture, but Jonas stood firm. "Not a chance. I didn't drag you through a blizzard just to abandon you now." His tone softened. "Besides, you might need help afterward." Cora hesitated, then nodded, accepting his choice. She returned to the crystal tree, placing both hands against its glowing surface. The wrist device activated fully, holographic displays expanding to unprecedented complexity as it interfaced with the ancient structure. Energy began to flow visibly from the tree, through Cora, to the Whisperers gathering in increasing numbers around them. The patterns beneath Cora's skin blazed with internal light, spreading up her arms and across her face in luminous networks. Her eyes, when she glanced back at Jonas, were pools of pure energy, the aurora colors swirling with hypnotic intensity. The Whisperers responded to her direction, their amorphous forms coalescing into a unified field that extended beyond the cavern, spreading through the ice in expanding rings. Jonas's scanner tracked their progress, showing the energy field encompassing the weather station just as the timer reached 0. The explosion came as a silent flash on the scanner's display, followed seconds later by a deep rumble that shook the very foundations of Asterion. The cavern walls trembled, ice crystals raining down in glittering cascades, but the structure held. Jonas watched in awe as the scanner displayed the impossible. The explosive force contained, channeled upward into Asterion's atmosphere in a spectacular but harmless display, rather than outward through the fragile ice shelf. The Whisperers had created a perfect energy conduit, transforming destructive force into harmless light. But the cost was immediate and devastating. Cora collapsed, the wrist device emitting erratic pulses of light and alarm tones that needed no translation. Jonas rushed to her side, catching her small form before she struck the ground. "Cora," he cradled her gently, scanning for signs of life. She breathed, but shallowly, her skin pale and the luminous patterns fading rapidly. The wrist device displayed critical warnings, its regulatory functions compromised by the massive energy surge. The Whisperers returned to the cavern, their mission accomplished, and circled anxiously around the fallen child. One approached more closely, its amorphous form brushing against Cora's wrist device with deliberate purpose. Others followed its example, surrounding Cora completely, their translucent substance seeming to flow into and through her. The wrist device responded, its warnings changing in character from critical failure to something more complex, a reconfiguration and adaptation. Jonas held Cora steady through the process, watching in mingled fear and hope as the Whisperers worked their incomprehensible assistance. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours, but gradually, perceptibly, Cora's condition began to stabilize. The patterns beneath her skin reappeared, faint at first, then stronger. Her breathing deepened, became more regular. Finally, her eyes opened, still aurora bright, but focused once more. She looked up at Jonas, then at the whisperers surrounding them, and a smile of wonder spread across her face. She raised her wrist, examining the device that had been both her lifeline and her limitation. It had changed, the alien technology now integrated with something new, crystalline elements that resembled the structure of the tree, glowing with the same bioluminescence as the ice fireflies. The Whisperers had modified it, using their intimate knowledge of Asterian's ancient technology to transform the corporate control mechanism into something more balanced, more symbiotic. Cora was no longer dependent on external regulation. The modified device now worked with her natural energies rather than restricting them. Jonas helped her sit up, steadying her as she adjusted to the change. "You did it," he said softly. "You saved this place, all of these beings." Cora nodded, her expression reflecting both exhaustion and profound satisfaction. She pointed to the crystal tree, then to herself, then made a gesture of continuing, of future. "You can stay connected to them now," Jonas interpreted, "without harming yourself. A true bridge, not a tool." The alien child's smile confirmed his understanding. She stood carefully, leaning on Jonas for support, and approached the crystal tree once more. When she placed her hand against its surface, the connection that formed was visibly different, a balanced exchange rather than the desperate drawing of energy from before. Through this renewed connection, Cora shared final images with Jonas, the Whisperer's gratitude, their acceptance of her as a genuine mediator rather than an imposed one. They offered sanctuary in the network of caverns beneath Asterian's surface, not just to Cora, but to others like her who might escape Rinter's facilities, guided by the message she had transmitted. A resistance, Jonas said with growing excitement. A safe haven for the others. He considered the implications, both personal and professional. His mission to investigate the disappearances on Asterian had evolved into something far more significant. The discovery of an ancient civilization still very much alive, and a corporate conspiracy that treated sentient beings as commodities. Cora sensed his thoughts, touching his arm questioningly. Jonas smiled reassuringly. "I have to report back eventually. My team will be searching for me once the storm clears. But I won't betray your location." He thought for a moment. "In fact, I can help. My organization has been investigating Rinter Corporation for other ethical violations. Your evidence, your very existence, could be the key to shutting down their entire operation." The alien child considered this, her expression thoughtful. She pointed to Jonas, then to the cavern entrance, then back to the crystal tree, raising her eyebrows in question. "Will I come back?" Jonas translated. He nodded without hesitation. "Wild horses couldn't keep me away. Though I admit, I have no idea what the idiom wild horses translates to in your language." Cora's confusion at the phrase brought a laugh from Jonas, the first genuine moment of lightness since finding her in the storm. The sound echoed pleasantly through the cavern, causing the ice fireflies to pulse more brightly in response. The Whisperers reacted too, their forms shifting into configurations that somehow conveyed approval. They had responded initially to fear and danger. Now they responded equally to joy and hope, emotions that had been rare on Asterian since their physical ancestors departed millennia ago. Outside, the storm had finally begun to subside. Jonas's scanner showed clearing conditions, and his emergency beacon was detecting response signals from his base. Rescue teams would be mobilizing soon, searching for their missing operative. "I should head to the surface," Jonas said reluctantly. "Establish contact before they mount a full-scale search operation." He looked at Cora earnestly. "You'll be safe here?" The alien child nodded confidently, gesturing to the Whisperers, the crystal tree, the entire hidden sanctuary. Her meaning was clear. She had found not just safety, but belonging, purpose, a role that honored her unique abilities without exploiting them. Jonas prepared to leave, gathering the supplies they would need for his journey to the surface. Cora accompanied him to the cavern entrance, the Whisperers forming an honor guard of sorts along their path. At the threshold between the warm sanctuary and Asterian's frozen surface, they paused for farewell. Words seemed inadequate for all they had experienced together. Instead, Cora reached up to touch Jonas's temple one last time, sharing not information but emotion, gratitude, affection, and a promise of reunion. In return, Jonas removed the insignia from his expedition uniform, a simple metal emblem representing the United Human Exploration Corps. He pressed it into Cora's small hand, closing her fingers gently around it. A reminder, he said, that not all humans see you as an experiment or a tool. Some of us recognize a person when we meet one, no matter what planet they're from. Cora examined the emblem, then carefully attached it to her modified wrist device, where it gleamed alongside the ancient crystalline technology. She looked up at Jonas, Aurora eyes bright with emotion, and spoke, not in her native language, but in carefully practiced English. Thank you. 4. Saving. Child and Storm. Jonas felt his throat tighten with emotion. Thank you for reminding me why we save each other. With a final nod of farewell, temporary, not permanent, Jonas stepped out onto Asterian's surface. The storm had cleared, leaving a pristine landscape of white beneath a sky where distant stars were becoming visible as clouds dispersed. He activated his emergency beacon to full power, signaling his location to the rescue teams surely en route. As he waited, gazing across the frozen wasteland that concealed such wonders beneath its surface, Jonas thought of Emma, of failure transformed into purpose, of guilt giving way to renewed commitment. No child dies alone in the cold, he murmured to the stars above, not while compassion still exists. Behind him, just within the hidden entrance to the ice firefly cave, a small blue figure watched, Aurora eyes reflecting starlight, while around her, the ancient guardians of Asterion whispered their eternal secrets, no longer alone in their vigil beneath the ice.